Thank you for joining us today for Armchair Historians. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cannon. Armchair Historians is a Belgian Rabbit production. Stay up to date with us through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Wherever you listen to your podcast, that is where you'll find us. You can also find us at armchairhistorians.com. I'd also like to keep you updated about our Patreon page. So if you go to www.patreon.com/armchairhistorians, that's historians with an S, you can sign up to support the program. We're trying to do this podcast commercial free, but we also want to add value to our supporters. So over the next week, we will be adding exclusive patron-only content to our Patreon page. Be looking for that. But also, we appreciate your support. And if you feel that there is value in the content that we're providing, for $3 or $5 or $10 or whatever you can afford, it will help us to continue providing Armchair Historians free podcast. And if you can't afford to throw us any money, that's totally cool. We still hope you will continue to listen to the podcast. We'll provide a link to our Patreon page in our episode notes. Welcome. Today is part 3 of the Kevin Kuharic interview. Kevin serves as Executive Director of Hotel de Paris Museum, a site of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He is also writing history and art appreciation books about Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, Georgia. In addition, Mr. Kuharic has contributed to the books James Novelli, A Forgotten Sculptor, Building Metropolitan Atlanta, Past, Present, and Future, Urban Green, Innovative Parks for Resurgent Cities, Atlanta's Oakland Cemetery, an illustrated history and guide, and Cultural Heritage Tourism, 5 Steps for Success and Sustainability. In this episode, we continue to talk to Kevin about the mysterious Frenchman Louis Dupuy, about how Louis incorporated his knowledge of sanitary science into the running of his hotel, how he's been depicted over the years in pop culture, and finally, one major life lesson that Kevin has learned from Louis Dupuy.
We have those disconnects ourselves.
So you say in the article that you think, and you said this earlier in the interview, is that you think that Louis was a bit of a germaphobe, I think you said?
All but one room in the hotel contains a hand sink. So that is an abundance of sink. And in some cases, a room will have 2 sinks. The dining room, the sinks are slightly out of the room, but adjacent to the room. So arguably every room has access to a sink or 2. So that is one reason why I think he was a borderline germaphobe, but he also took daily ice cold baths. So he got an ice delivery daily, not only for
ice cold.
Box, yes. So
why
of course,
ice?
Well, the ice was not only for the kitchen, for the refrigerator, for the food, but he also reserved some for his bathtub. So he had a soaking tub, and his belief was that it was good for his health. So he's eating granola. He's going to the gym and working out. He's taking these ice cold baths, which he felt made his muscle tone look better. And so he has all of these health and hygiene practices. He was selling soap and other toiletries in the hotel dining room. So he was, again, entrepreneurial. He's selling you what you need, but he's expecting you to wash your hands often. He's wanting you to bathe in your room. So most rooms did not have a bath. They had the sink, so it would be a sponge bath. He had things like toothwash, and he had a variety of medicine for sale too. He wanted people to feel good, and he wanted them to be safe and healthy. Again, feeling responsible for his clientele.
One of the other things you say in the article is you reference the Eastlake style, and what does that have to do with cleanliness?
All right. So Louis Dupuy's Hotel de Paris, this is how I describe it. It's a French inn in the Colorado Rockies with an English style interior, Charles Eastlake style. built by Chinese workers. And so Charles Eastlake was a popular writer in the late 19th century. He was writing books on decor and design for the home. So he's writing during a time of industrialization. So what's happening in the world is people are moving out of the countryside into cities for jobs in industry, factories. With this comes problems. Proximity is increased, so things like communicable diseases are passed more readily, and there's lots of pollution, dust that is infecting people's lungs. So you start to see a spike in illness during the industrial era. So what Charles Eastlake does, he writes these books on design and decor, and it was a very modern way of thinking. He wants to create a safer environment in which people can live. So with industrialization comes an emerging middle class at the same time. So there are things running sort of parallel to each other. So you have people moving into the cities, and they also, for the first time, have the ability to own their own home, but not employ a staff. They have to clean that home themselves, just like most of us today. So he wants to fight dust and disease, and he wants to make ease of homekeeping. So these two things overlap in what becomes known as Eastlake style. So he begins to advocate the use of shallow carving and streamlined designs that will collect less dust, so they will be safer and create a cleaner environment, but they also are easier to clean for that middle class. Not only is he talking about getting rid of, very intricate carving like Rococo style and going with this streamlined Eastlake style, he wants people to hang their pictures in a different way. Instead of hanging them from a picture rail with a silk cord that would, through static electricity, attract dust to that cord and be difficult to clean, he wants you to replace that with a metal wire that would not attract dust and be very easy to clean with one swipe. And so Louis is aware of these practices. He's picking and choosing what he wants to do in his hotel and his private quarters. And so the dominant style of the interior of the hotel is Eastlake style. There are some Oriental accents, but primarily it's Eastlake style. So he was on the cutting edge, and he was really choosing how to build that hotel out in order to keep it easy to take care of and safe for the people who visited and lived in it.
So you believe that was a conscious decision and it had to do with cleanliness in the hotel?
I do believe that. And it was stylish. So he was a bit of a peacock, dressed in very fancy clothes, but I think that he could afford to be current, and he made those choices consciously. I do.
I thought that was interesting. One of the other things you talk about in the article is that this idea of white linen, white apron, and it's so basic, and yet I had never thought of it before. And talk a little bit about that.
Right. So white is associated with cleanliness and hygiene. And so he's aware of this. And so he chooses for the beds in the guest rooms to have white pillowcases, white sheets, and white coverlets. He wants to know when these items are dingy or soiled so he can send them to the laundry. The laundry was at the hotel. It occupied the back of the kitchen, and the person who oversaw the laundry was a Chinese gardener we know as John Tao. John was on-site staff. So what he would do, he would heat water on a second stove that has not survived to present day. So he would heat that water, put it in a copper wash pot. Copper's important, we'll come back to that. Puts it in a copper wash pot with lye soap and borax. So he basically boils the sheets and the linens and then rinses them in cold, clear water, wrings them out, line dries them outside to further bleach them with the sun, and then brings them back inside and puts them through a cold roll mangle. And so what he's doing is he's sanitizing, he's disinfecting, he's making sure that if there are mites or bed bugs, those are killed, and then he's bleaching in order for everything to be pristine and clean. He's not only doing this with the bed linens, but he's doing this with his table linens. So on the tables, you would see white tablecloths and white napkins, nothing patterned, nothing colored. During this period where Louis Dupuy is running this, there are books on hotel keeping that deal with sanitation, that deal with laundry, with how to clean rooms. That's on my list of things to read. Luckily, some of
Okay.
these things are available online. Later, after Louis Dupuy passes away and a local family, the Burkholders, take over, they join a hotel association. And so in the 20th century, there were trade magazines that would go to innkeepers, hotel keepers, people who ran bars, saloons, and restaurants. And so the communication within the industry is similar to what we would experience today. I'm not sure when inspections started. I would guess, if I had to guess, I would say probably after the 1918 flu pandemic.
Yeah, that makes sense. So he was taking this on himself and implementing this because he was a man of science and he believed what science told him. And so, I mean, this is what I'm gathering from what you've said and what you've written. So he uh, implemented these things on his own, is what I'm trying to say.
I would say that's accurate, yes.
So one of the ooh moments that when I was reading the article was you talk about, where they missed the mark, and you've already just talked about a couple of those things, but the one that was like, oh, that is so disgusting was that they would take the leftovers from patrons and they'd put it all together and then they'd feed it to the help.
Right. So believe me, it elicits a reaction on every tour.
Oh,
Usually chuckles, but it is an ew moment. And so, I guess it's just the nature of humans to maybe miss the mark or be inconsistent. But he was a very thrifty guy. And so he does save up money and he would invest in the best. He was known to be first class all the way. But when he could save money, he could. And I think that is a cultural thing too that he brings as a Frenchman. And so he was known to take leftovers from the plates of patrons in the restaurant dining room and make those into a soup for his support staff. He employed 3 local ladies who lived in Silver Plume and Georgetown, which are 2 miles distant from each other. They were waitresses. He had 2 French musicians from Silver Plume, a violinist and a fiddler. Of course, he had the housekeeper, Sophie Galley, the gardener, John Tao, and a chambermaid, Sarah Curtin. So he has all of that staff to feed. So they eat in the kitchen, back of the house, and he feeds them by making a soup from these leftovers. Now, I think all of us react with "ew" initially, but I've asked around, and I'm married to a cook, and I asked if this was a safe practice or not. And I was assured if it was boiled long enough and hot enough, it fixes a lot of problems.
yeah, I
And
guess.
so I'll go with that.
Yeah, I mean, that struck me too. I thought, well, if you cook the heck out of it, you'll
Right,
cook the germs out of it. I don't
right,
know, kill them
right,
anyways.
right.
So, but
But
still, it's gross. It's
he
just
was doing
gross.
many sanitary things
Sure.
back in the
I'm
kitchen.
sure it was a common practice.
Oh, it absolutely was. And I don't know. I would say that restaurants are probably discouraged from doing that now.
Well, yeah, I would think so.
But who
I
really
think that would be, God, I would hope not. Um,
But there were other sanitary things happening back in the kitchen. His countertops, for instance, were largely sheet zinc, and zinc is known to be antimicrobial. And so he's preparing food on food safe surfaces in in the commercial kitchen. And these are also easy to clean for him with soap and water when he's done baking or done chopping or done butchering meat. He's able to clean this zinc surface. And he's also cooking in copper pans and pots, and he had copper mixing bowls. And again, the laundry was being boiled in a copper pot. Copper has antimicrobial properties as well. And so he's aware of these things. They're available, they're on the market, and
How do
he's
we
used,
know? How do we know that he is aware of these things and that
well,
he has zinc counters and it was just zinc? He ordered them because they were there. I don't know. How do we know that?
in 1867, a man by the name of Victor Burke, a Frenchman, um, he's a doctor, you could argue a scientist, a metallurgist. He discovers that copper is antimicrobial. And so it begins to show people that things like brass, which are an alloy of copper and zinc, are going to be antibacterial. So this all comes together again during the industrial age when they are mass producing things like door hardware or accessories for the home out of brass. It's affordable, it's easily cast in mold, so it's attractive, it's plentiful, and it has the built-in advantage of being healthy. It has health benefits. So Louis purchases for the hotel brass doorknobs. So within minutes of somebody touching the doorknob, the viruses and the bacteria are killed through their contact with these metals.
So is that evidenced in the books that he has in his library? Is that information in these books that he has that you draw from when you're writing this article?
That is why I pulled the books off the shelf. I want to see what he saw and I want to try to know what he knew. And so I have not completed reading those books yet.
Hmm.
I've pulled them from his library. I've completed one about healthy living, and it dealt mostly with diet, but a little bit about environment. But I am pretty confident I will come
Hmm.
across those
Yeah.
passages where these things are mentioned. He also has hundreds of periodicals that have survived, magazines and newspapers, and so that information may be contained in those publications. So right now it's a needle in a haystack,
Yeah.
but I'm
Sure.
in but I'm in the haystack.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you're in the haystack. You've spent years, trying to know what he knew, and I love all the detail. I love all the info. Like I said, this interview is giving my podcast street cred because I'm a history nerd. I love history. I'm coming from the perspective of that. Somebody who likes to talk about history, likes to talk about pop culture. So that's where I'm coming from. I mean, obviously, you bring so much to this story and this narrative, and I watch you build on it every year, and I love to be fed all the new details. So,
Well, I'll tell you, I have to synthesize the information that we know. I put theories out there. Sometimes I'm able to prove them, and other times they're disproved over time. But I'm open to that because I want to find the truth. I want to be accurate. I want to tell the story in the right way. It doesn't need to be embellished. It's so interesting on its own.
sure, yeah.
And so, although we have 5,000 objects original to the building, and that makes Hotel de Paris the most complete historic site in the state of Colorado. It's considered a time capsule. It's virtually intact. There are still many unanswered questions, partly due to a fire that occurred in 1942 in a nearby building, part of the hotel complex. But there was a storage room that all the contents were lost, and I believe that was the moment that we lost all of Louis' most personal possessions, photographs, diaries, clothing,
Ugh,
jewelry.
bummer.
I know it pains me to think about it, so I try not to think about it too often. But truth be told, we will never know everything. And so I find I'm not as self-critical when it comes to creating theories and synthesizing knowns in order to come up with that theory.
Uh-huh.
Because we just will never really know the complete answer without diaries, without recordings. So we have to look at the built environment, the artifacts in the building that are original to the building. We need to look at the library. We need to look at every clue. The artwork, I think, possesses clues, things that interest him. And I think it's all right for us as researchers and scholars to draw conclusions, but be open to refining or retracting those conclusions later.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've said, because I have been a tour guide. I am a tour guide. I have a company. We do historic tours. We do ghost tours that is, interlaced with history. But there's been many times in my career as a tour guide that I am telling a story that I believe to be true with the true facts, and then I find out new information, and then I have to change the narrative I'm telling. Like you say, you have to be open.
Mm-hmm. It's I think important and professional to be transparent. And if you don't know, it's okay to say that. And if it's a theory, it's okay to say that. And if it gets disproved later, I think it's okay to own that. I have no problem with that. I think that's what keeps my interest there, is that the story is not over. The story's still being discovered and will be for years and years and years. So I feel extremely fortunate to be at the hotel during this period where there's time to be curious, there's time to ask the questions, there's time to look for the answers.
So at this point in the interview, I decide to switch gears to talk about something a little bit lighter and something that I know is near and dear to Kevin's heart. So I have a really important question I'd like to ask you. What would your pet say about you?
Oh, they would say that I'm gentle and that I'm a borderline pest because I love to groom them like a monkey and hold them and kiss on them and carry them around, and I like to hold them over my shoulder and dance to songs. I'm probably a pest, a loving pest.
Do you think, though, that they like that about you, that you're a loving pest? Your
Yes,
dogs you have sweet little dogs. You have Molly, who is what is she?
she is primarily a Cairn Terrier. She's a mix, and we're guessing Cairn Terrier and Poodle, but she looks very terrier and
And she's
expert.
looking very svelte these days now that you've put her on a good diet.
Yes, she's sort of in rehab with us, and she likes to call it fat camp. So,
Really, how does she say that? What's her voice like?
oh, we struggle with a voice still. I go between voices I've established for pets that are no longer with us.
So now, we should say here that all of your pets from the past have their own distinctive voice.
They do.
What's Oliver's voice?
Oliver came from Cumming, Georgia. He's a Chihuahua, and so he has a Southern accent. In fact, if he had a singing voice, it's Bill Withers' singing voice. That's Oliver.
I'll put pictures of your pets in the episode on the webpage.
Okay.
Is there anything else about sanitary practices, Louis Dupuy, coronavirus that we want to talk about?
Sure. The other aspect of the hotel building itself is good air circulation, high ceilings, transoms, transom windows above doors, windows in virtually every room, skylights that could open, good cross ventilation. And this was to prevent stale air and something known as miasmas. Miasmas would be sick or polluted air, and it was believed if you inhaled these that you would become ill. And so there was good air circulation, antimicrobial surfaces, disinfecting of the site. And so I think all of those practices put together kept it a safe environment and kept trouble at bay for Louis Dupuy.
And that's actually a thing. I don't, we wouldn't call it that these days, but when you're talking about circulation and
I think we still practice these things.
I really just had one more question. Well, actually, two more questions. One of them is we didn't talk about pop culture and Louis Dupuy. You know, is Louis Dupuy or the hotel and/or the hotel depicted in pop culture? And can you tell me about that?
Even though the name Louis Dupuy is not a household name, um, as late as the 1950s, maybe even pushing it into the 1980s, there was still some fascination with him. So in the 1950s, CBS television challenged its producers to come up with story ideas for new series, and they wanted the genre to be westerns. The television series Hotel de Paris was created in 1959, spelled P-A-R-E-E phonetically, and it starred Earl Holliman as a Louis Dupuy type character, an outlaw, a man with a troubled past who goes to Georgetown, Colorado, becomes proprietor of a French inn, and through crime fighting turns his life around. So he goes from a bad guy to a good guy. That's sort of his story arc. And so it's thinly veiled as the Louis Dupuy reinvention, where he has a very troubled past and then he gets on the straight and narrow and finds his greatest success.
Is there a place we can go to watch it?
This has been challenging for me. I have been able to track down 3 complete episodes of 33, so very few. It's considered a rare and obscure Western. I've been able to also find the opening and closing credits and I think some commercials that ran during the show. But to my knowledge, the show has not been preserved and archived. I do know that in California at the Margaret Herrick Library, which is owned and operated by the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, they have the archive of the show, but it amounts to ephemera, notes, production notes, scripts, correspondences, and so they don't have any film. And so I've tried to, without success, contact CBS to see if the show is archived somewhere. It is my hope, my dream, that the 33 episodes are parked on a shelf in storage somewhere in Los Angeles and that they'll be rediscovered at some point. The show only went 1 year. It's, as I mentioned, 33 episodes. They're in black and white. Each episode is a half hour long. The show relied on a lot of gimmicks, and so it was based in fact. It was based in Louis's life and set in a fictitious Georgetown. All of it was filmed in California on sound stages and exterior sets. But the producers did come to the real Georgetown and to the real Hotel de Paris. They looked at it, went back and built their sets. Because the show was new, the producer was young and inexperienced, a lot of gimmicks were used. There was a sidekick to the character, the lead character, whose name was Sundance, not Louis Dupuy. So Sundance had a sidekick who was a dog, and the dog's name was Useless. Sundance also wore a black Stetson with a mirrored hat band, and he would...
Was he French? Did he speak with a French accent?
No, he was very This is what sort of made some people associated with the museum upset back in the 50s. The Louis Dupuy type character was not educated whatsoever. He was sort of an aw shucks kind of guy, and that even bothered the star Earl Holliman, who wanted more intelligent dialogue and more of it.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so there were many liberties taken in the production, so it is not a biopic at all. In fact, they take some personality traits of different real historical figures and sort of mix them up between different roles. It's very strange. There was a parade of stars, much like The Love Boat, where every episode had a new star. And there was also a parade of directors. And so there was not continuity. There were guest directors, there were guest stars. It was just fraught with problems, plus this very green, inexperienced producer who oversold his background,
Hmm.
and in the first episode got over budget and off schedule so bad it snowballed for the rest of the series. And so when it was up for renewal, um, they decided that the expense and risk was too much, and so the show was canceled after one season.
So is there a place online we can go to watch it? The three
Yes,
episodes? Okay.
yes.
So
If
we'll
you
include
go,
that. We'll include that in the episode notes.
great.
You were going to say if you go to where?
Uh, I have parked those episodes and the opening and closing credits on YouTube at Hotel de Paris Museum channel, and
Okay.
I'd be happy to share that link with you.
Yeah, that would be great. So that's Louis Dupuy, erroneously depicted in Hollywood comedy series. Are there any other?
Yeah, I think it had comic elements. I don't know if they called it a comedy or a drama. It was family friendly and it was moralistic. It was every episode sort of had a lesson, and so I think it was definitely family friendly. But the other pop culture references for him are literary. Louis L'Amour, who's a Western writer and he's been called America's storyteller, includes Louis Dupuy in two of his novels, The Proving Trail and Riley's Luck. Louis L'Amour stays true but writes him into fictional stories. And so in those two novels, Louis Dupuy plays Louis Dupuy, and he's at Hotel de Paris in Georgetown, Colorado.
And
And
what was the
so
time frame for that?
I think in the 70s or 80s, probably in the 1980s. And Louis L'Amour visited Hotel de Paris at least once, and he considered Louis Dupuy one of the most colorful Western characters and an underappreciated figure, which I completely agree.
What do you want people to be left with? What do you want people to know about him?
Wow. What I find inspiring about Louis, and I think others do too, so this would be my takeaway from his life and his experiences, is it's rarely too late to start over. He reinvents himself a number of times in his life, and his final and most successful reinvention is at the age of 31.
And that concludes my interview with Kevin Kuharic. To find out more about the Hotel de Paris or Louis Dupuy, or how to visit the hotel, go to hoteldeparismuseum.org. I'll put a link to the museum in the episode note. Stay tuned for our Kid Wisdom segment. This week we listened to part 3 of my interview with my great-nephew, who, as I've said before, is a great-nephew. 6-year-old Finley talks this week about something that was on his mind when I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, but it didn't really fit into the categories of things we were talking about, which included the coronavirus and his favorite history. I hope you enjoy this informative segment as much as I did.
Oh, this is about it's like something that we're not talking about in this.
That's fine. You can talk about anything.
It's this snake that it's really cool because like it has these side fans that open up and close.
It's a
And
snake and it has side. Does it come out when it opens and closes, or can you see it?
it just does this.
Okay.
And it has venomous teeth.
Ooh, what does that mean, venomous teeth?
That means it has poison in its
Teeth.
teeth in its
Ooh.
mouth also.
So, do you know the name of this snake so I can look it up and then I can put a link to it on the podcast?
Yeah, it's called like I'm gonna think for a second. Oh, King Cobra.
Oh, okay. I don't really know a lot about snakes because I don't really like snakes.
Yeah, but this one's really cool because it like does really cool stuff. It like when it swallows something, the animal doesn't die at first, but then it goes through the body, and then the venom just goes right into the animal. Oh, but this is sad. This is a snake that I actually saw once. The sad thing about that snake, it's coming extinct because sometimes when it eats its prey, there's these like things in its venom that protect its like heart from the venom, and then what happens is if the venom gets into the heart, then instead of the animal dying, the snake dies.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What you got there? You got another mask?
Yeah, two. I have two masks.
Since this is a video call, I see Finley's mom, Megan, who is my niece, hands him two hand-sewn masks. Those are
But they're
cool.
They're
Your
both
mom's really talented, isn't she?
Yeah.
How are your mom and dad doing through this whole thing?
Good, but yeah, kind of stressed.
Yeah, it's stressful. It's stressful for a lot of people.
Yeah. Because I really want to see my friends again, but like I want to see my friends in real life, not like on video, because when I have this meeting at school, this is something that like it annoys me, like computers and stuff that the kids are on, like people screaming, but they're singing and like doing stuff, but
Okay.
like it sounds like screaming to me.
Oh, it hurts your insides?
Yeah, it just like
Yeah.
it like spins my brain around in circles.
Oh, I know. That sounds frustrating. So it sounds really loud sometimes.
It's weird. It sounds like so weird. And
Sometimes I notice, because I've been doing a lot of video chatting with people, and one of the things that I notice is that sometimes I can't understand what somebody's saying, and it sounds like they're talking underwater. Like
that's the same exact thing that happens at school, at video school.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Not really.
Okay, well, you've been really informative. I'm sure that our audience is really going to love hearing about your thoughts on things.
Do you have any more questions or thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, if you think of something else, we can schedule another time to talk. Because actually, honestly, I think we've talked about so many things in this interview that I'll probably I'll probably split it up and put it on different episodes. So, because what did we talk about? We talked about Corona. We talked about all the different things, having to be home to be safe. We talked about your favorite history. Your favorite president was Abraham Lincoln.
Yep.
And we talked about Brock.
Yeah.
And how he's just a regular guy, and that's the thing you like the most about him. We talked about how how you don't like our current president because you think he lies. I agree.
Yeah.
And then the other big bonus that I'm really excited about is that you told me all about the King Cobra.
Yeah.
So that's like 4 different episodes for me.
That way, you probably have to like split every half of the episode into different episodes.
Anything else you want to tell me about yourself that I can put in your bio on the podcast page that you want people to know?
This is another thing about the corona, that you all stay safe and you wash your hands.
I'll quote you on that. Anything else?
No.
I think you did an amazing job. You explained a lot of things to me, and I think it's going to be really helpful to our listeners. You did a great job. So,
Yeah.
All right, buddy. I love you.
Bye.
Bye. And there you have it. That concludes episode 1 in 3 parts. Join us next time when we speak to YouTube sensation Julian McDonald of Jules Guides.
There was this revolution and they chopped his head off. And then they had this bloke called Oliver Cromwell, who was in charge of something called the Commonwealth, I think they called it. Anyway, so he started acting a bit like a king.
See you next time.